everyone. This is Wei Wei. I am the first year PhD student in kinesiology and community health. My research focuses on people with disability and their quality of life. So for my work too, I think it's a great opportunity for me to introduce the inclusive education for students with disabilities in China. I think this topic aligns well with the course content because this class is a good illustration of the need for the education system to consider our perspective of the students, including the students' abilities, cultural background, ethnicities, etc. And Kinsey's and Kolb mentioned that learning happens every day and that successful learning is determined by the different subjective variables. What this means is students with disability in inclusive education system are empowered by how the environment contribute and achieve their goals by having the inclusive education system. Personally, this reflects back to my personal experiences when I both actually experienced the education system in the United States and China. I was born and raised up in China until I came to the United States for the higher education. I observed the two system differences, and compared to the United States, China has a far more aspect in education system that need to be restructured. I will introduce more in these sections. So I was graduated with a degree in occupational therapy, and the reason behind it is because one of my really close family members, my uncle, he passed away because of stroke. And before he passing away, he actually developed disability because he had a really severe hemorrhagic stroke and that causing him to be paralyzed. He underwent social isolation and mental distress because his disability, and also he experienced extreme shortcomings of being people with disability in China because we don't have the adequate infrastructure system for him, and there's no modification for people with disabilities. So it will be difficult for them to live in a society like in China without any accommodations or help. Because of him, I cemented my interest of promoting the barrier-free healthcare system in China and creating accessible health education for all individuals. So let me introduce about the current situation for students with disabilities in China. The statistics report that we have like 4 million people with disabilities in China, while like the total number of people with a disability made up 85 million. A lot of people with disabilities are people live in poverty, and due to the unemployment and insufficient monthly income, people with a disability actually earn less than $330 per year, which compared to the average annual income, the people with disability actually have severely low income, and the 80% of them living in the rural areas. It's different compared to the United States that people want to live in like rural areas, have that quiet environment, but in China it's opposite. Like the people who actually have money prefer to live in the urban city because they're more convenient and more job opportunities, and the higher education systems are more available to that district. And with limited government support and infrastructure systems for people with impairments are remain at the bottom of the social ladder and in a severely disadvantaged position. The reason behind this whole thing happen is because people with disabilities have either never received education, or they were educated in a special education system that they cannot learn something is required or useful for them to find decent amount paid salary job in the future. They usually work as like labor force in the labor factory, and they earn $300 per year. Not only because the social economic barriers that set boundaries for them to go to school, it's also because students with this impairment are not accommodated by the schools. For example, for students with physical disabilities, they don't even have modified transportation system for them to use a wheelchair to board on the bus to go to school, or even once they enter the school, the toilets or the restroom are not accommodated for them, let alone the doors that opening for in the public schools or private schools. So even they enter in the school, there are so many barriers for them to receive their education. A lot of family live in poverty with the children with disabilities. They're treated as a burden, or they're being neglected or treated unfair compared to other children in the family. People have the stigma in China, thinking their children with disability consider a source of guilt or shame for the family. So along with one child policy, a lot of people, when they were first born with a child with disability, they were either abandoned, or they've been using them to have for like a begging purpose on the street. The report saying that more than 10,000 children were abandoned annually in China. The data shows in 2009. Although we have this policy back in 1986 saying China stated that all children with or without disability who reach the age of 6 should be enrolled in school to receive 9 years compulsory education. As I mentioned above, this does not really work in school, because since there no such of awareness, like the teacher doesn't know how to accommodate the students' needs, and the school itself, they don't have the modified accommodations for the student to receive the resources and support. Here I just introduced about disability rights in China that we've been working on to support the people with disabilities. However, although with the government funding, it still seems insufficient to provide an adequate education and accessible learning system for people in the with disability in China. Also, the attitudes of people, including the teacher, peers, and the parents, are unaware of inclusive education, so they don't know how to act to get have their rights to be motivated to enhance instruction that tailor to students with disabilities. So the purpose of having inclusive disability rights is to raising their awareness, and they can advocate for their rights. The inclusive education, as defined by the United Nations Children's Fund, means every child has a right to quality education learning. So all children are in the same classroom and schools, receiving the equal opportunities to be educated, and being provided with effective education, and reasonable accommodations to reach to the equal statement of the education. So here are some strategies of creating an inclusive environment for students with a wide range of disabilities, like understanding and instruct each child, tailoring due to his or her personal needs, explain the ground rules for the students and set the expectations, letting the students know what to expect. Encourage all students to participate in the group activities despite their abilities and promote social engagement. Build a good relationship with the parents and treat the children with all abilities with respect and positive attitudes. The Individual with Disability Education Act is provide public education to eligible children with disability in the country and providing the the accommodations for them. I think China can learn how the education system works in the United States to better promote our environment. So learning happens all time in daily life, and it's a fundamental part that how we as a human beings. So in order to promote the positive peer relationship and allowing the children with disabilities can actually build the social skills and to better fit in the society in the future, that like other majority of norms, to having the skills of problem solving and group activities with their peers. It's important to make them in the inclusive education system so they can interact with students without disabilities. Here, the limitations is especially during COVID, a lot of the schools in China went to online setting, so the students are taking the classes at their home. So adding the barriers of having the special education system is make an extremely difficult time for the student to remain in the home and receive the education, and even have less chance to interact with their peers, and also some difficulties of not having assistance or assistive technologies, B2B distant learning. So in China, the one-size-fits-all standard design significantly eliminate the equal opportunity for children with disability to access the education system. Ultimately, creating an accessible, inclusive education system is really important. Not only just require the policy and the regulation that I mentioned above, but also their attitudes. So the parents should change their attitude towards their children in China, treating them like other majority of norm children, like children without disability, giving them the equal love and support. So the teacher in schools especially need to know how to assess their abilities and how to provide the correct, reasonable recommendations, and a school infrastructure system need to make modification to allow them to have the equal rights to the education. And also, lastly, educate the students without disability to treat children with disability as treating themselves, and encourage the peer-to-peer interaction to foster the growth of relationship. So having the general understanding and how different disability affect learning can prepare our society to better confident and allowing the inclusive society in the future. Thank you, and here are the references.